Voilà. Ça, c'est du gaz de broussaille. Et ça, c'est de la lumière de broussaille.
Imagine this. Heat strong enough to warm up an entire house, and it's not coming from fire, gas, or even electricity. It's coming from a pile of rotting wood. Yeah, you heard me right. A compost heap powering a home, cooking meals, even running a car. Sounds crazy, right? But here's the thing. It's real. It actually happened. Over 50 years ago, in the forests of southern France, one ordinary man with no degree, no fancy lab, and no funding unlocked a secret hiding in plain sight. So, here's the big question. How can a wet pile of wood chips generate enough heat to power a house for 18 months straight? How did this guy manage to run his appliances, heat his water, and even fuel his car with energy pulled straight from decay? And why, after his invention worked, got featured in global magazines, and caught the world's attention, was it forgotten? That's what we're going to uncover in today's episode. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like. It really helps support the channel. The story begins in the 1970s with a French forester named Jean Pain. Jean lived with his wife in the dry, rocky hills of Provence. The land was tough, poor soil, barely any water, and a life that forced him to get creative just to survive. He couldn't even afford straw for his goats, so instead he shredded the brushwood from his forest and used that as bedding. And the result? Not only did it worked better. The goats thrived, their manure mixed with the wood chips, creating compost so rich it transformed Jean's barren soil into fertile land. Soon he was growing massive watermelons, towering tomato plants, even tropical crops in soil that was supposed to be dead. Then came a turning point. The French government passed a wildfire law, forcing landowners to clear huge amounts of brushwood. Jean suddenly had piles and piles of wood waste, and instead of burning it, he soaked it, stacked it, and waited. That's when something strange happened. The pile started to heat up. Not just warm, it was hot, day and night, constant. That was the spark. Jean turned this weird phenomenon into a system. What he built became known as the biomiler. He stacked over 40 tons of chipped brushwood into a massive mound. Inside it, he coiled 650 feet of polyethylene tubing. Cold water went in one side and came out the other at about 140 degrees Fahrenheit. That hot water kept his home warm, filled his bathtub, and gave him hot showers for up to 18 months straight without burning a single log. But Jean didn't stop there. In the middle of the pile, he placed a sealed steel tank full of soaked brushwood. As it decomposed, it released methane. He collected it in old truck inner tubes. That gas powered his stove, a small generator, and even his car. This wasn't just a compost heap. It was a living machine, silent, powerful, and built entirely from waste. Jean Pain wasn't just experimenting anymore. He was living it. The methane gave him enough fuel to cook meals for a year. The generator converted some of that gas into electricity, about 100 watts. Not much, but enough to light his 5-bedroom home and run the essentials. And, yeah, even his car ran on compressed methane stored in 2 roof-mounted cylinders, good for about 60 miles per tank. Every part of Jean's life was powered by decay. And when the pile's energy finally ran out, it didn't leave behind waste. It left behind rich, dark compost, which Jean spread over his land, feeding the soil and restarting the cycle. Jean had built more than a heating system. He had built a closed-loop life. For a while, the world paid attention. Journalists and energy experts visited from around the globe. Reader's Digest featured him in 1981. His book sold over 100,000 copies. People saw it as revolutionary. Energy, heat, fertilizer, and fuel, all from brushwood. And yet, it faded away. Not because it didn't work. It worked brilliantly. But it demanded space, effort, patience. You needed a forest, or at least a steady source of wood. You needed to chip, soak, and pile it. It wasn't instant. It wasn't plug and play. Governments didn't push it. Corporations couldn't profit from it. And so, while society was chasing convenience, fossil fuels, and scale, Jean's quiet forest reactor slipped into obscurity.
Fast forward to today. We're desperate for clean energy, cheap fertilizer, wildfire prevention, and yet half a century ago, Jean Pain had already shown us a solution. His biomiler gave heat, power, gas, and soil fertility, all at once. Zero emissions, zero waste, pure regeneration. And what did we choose instead? Systems that pollute, extract, and depend on massive industry. The irony? Jean's pile of rotting wood might be more relevant now than ever. What made Jean's invention so powerful wasn't just that it worked, it's that nothing was wasted. The wood chips gave heat, then gas, then compost. The methane cooked his meals, ran his lights, and left nothing behind but clean exhaust. Even clearing brushwood helped protect his forest from wildfires. Every piece of the system served multiple roles. It wasn't just sustainable, it was regenerative. And maybe that's the real lesson. Innovation doesn't always look like a shiny new machine. Sometimes it looks like a compost heap quietly doing the impossible. Jean Pain didn't discover futuristic technology. He simply listened to nature and followed its logic. And the question he leaves us with is this. If all you had was time and a forest full of wood, what would you build? So now that you've heard the story of Jean Pain, let me ask you this. What do you think? I mean, really think about it. We live in a world where we pay endless bills for gas, electricity, fuel, fertilizers, and food. And yet, decades ago, one stubborn man in the forest built a system where all of that, literally all of it, came from a pile of sticks and brushwood. No factories, no billion-dollar industries, no pollution, just patience, hard work, and a willingness to see the invisible. And here's the part that blows my mind. The system didn't just not harm the planet. It actually healed it. The soil grew richer, the forest became safer, the air stayed clean. Every part of his life got easier, freer, more connected, while the land around him grew healthier too. That's not just sustainability, that's regeneration. Now, let's get real. Could you or I walk into a forest tomorrow and build what Jean built? Probably not right away. It takes time, space, and commitment. And yeah, maybe that's exactly why the world ignored him, because his solution couldn't be mass-produced, couldn't be sold in a shiny box, couldn't be packaged as a product. But that doesn't mean it wasn't powerful. In fact, that might be what made it so powerful. So here's the question I want to leave you with. What are we missing right now? What invisible forces are hiding in plain sight, just waiting for someone curious enough to notice? Are we so obsessed with convenience and profit that we've blinded ourselves to solutions that actually give more than they take? Think about it. Jean wasn't a scientist, he wasn't an engineer, he wasn't rich. He was just a man who listened to the forest, listened to the land, and trusted what he saw with his own eyes. If he could build energy, heat, food, and fuel out of decay, then what could you build if you stopped waiting for permission, stopped waiting for the perfect tool, stopped waiting for someone else to hand you the answer? Maybe you're not going to build a compost reactor in your backyard, and that's okay. But maybe you'll look at the world a little differently. Maybe the next time you see waste, you'll ask yourself, what can this become? Maybe the next time someone tells you an idea is too weird, too messy, or too small, you'll remember Jean Pain and how a forgotten pile of wood chips once powered a whole life. Because at the end of the day, innovation doesn't always look like a shiny new machine. Sometimes it looks like a compost heap quietly doing the impossible. Jean Pain didn't discover futuristic technology, he simply listened to nature and followed its logic. And the question he leaves us with is this. If all you had was time, determination, and a pile of wood, what would you build?